Welcome to Freedom Biz Now, featuring the best and brightest from the business community, large and small. Today's guest is a Sports Business Journal's 40 Under 40 award recipient and the president of the Houston World Cup Bid Committee, Chris Canetti. And here's your host, founder of Freedom Sports and Entertainment, Mark Washo.
And you're live.
Hello, Chris Canetti, Mark Washo. Hope you're doing well. Can you hear me okay?
I got you loud and clear, Mark. How are you?
Good. Hey, that was really professional. So I want to give an early shout out to Scott Fitzgerald and Rock Vox Studios here in Rochester, New York. It's a podcast studio, local small business right down the street, kind of close to where I live here in Rochester. And figure we use it as an opportunity to facilitate this discussion and talk a little bit about crisis during in sports, during things like we're experiencing right now. And so, Chris, thanks for coming on and joining me. And didn't mean to be so formal, but we decided to take advantage of a resource here not too far down the street from me. But so if I may ask, so Chris, to cue this up, I mean, when this whole thing started, this COVID-19 coronavirus, it reminded me right away of September 11. And when we were all working together at the Metro Stars, you were kind of one of the first people I thought of because I know everybody has their own September 11 story, but we were like literally right there. We saw it in front of our eyes, in front of our office windows, which were in Secaucus overlooking the World Trade Center. And I was like, man, this feels so much like that, and how everything seemed like it was coming to an end, and you know what's going to happen after this. So I outreached to you, Chris, and I was like, we started reflecting on some memories, and I was like, well, maybe we could start with that because those are our experiences, and we kind of lived through that. I know since then you've even had some other crises that you managed through, including myself. So from a sports business perspective, looking back to like 9/11 and those memories that you have with the Metro Stars, what comes to mind right now, kind of based on what we're going through current moment?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Mark. We all have our stories of 9/11. And, if we think back to that Tuesday morning in Secaucus, New Jersey, all of our front office staff was watching it unfold out the window, watching planes hit towers and towers collapse. And, in the subsequent days, I think the thing that was common then that is common now is just the uncertainty that lies ahead, right? I remember thinking at the moment, and we all thought at the moment, what does the future hold for all of us as Americans or just as people? And I think that same prevailing thought exists today in society. In fact, it may even be more unpredictable or more, just frightening in terms of what the future might hold here, because nobody really understands how this whole thing is going to end. And I know, this is a time, this broadcast is about talking about sports. And when we were there with the Metro Stars, there was a desire to continue to go forward as a business, but it really wasn't reality at the time. There was a community that was trying to heal, that was trying to focus on other priorities. And as a front office and a sports organization, there really wasn't a great opportunity to go about it business as normal. So I remember, being in the organization there, you and myself and the rest of the leadership team trying to figure out how could we go forward? How could we keep coming to work every day? How could we keep our organization together? How could we perform and provide value not only to the business, but to the community? And that was really the trick of the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you and I had spoke a little bit about this and we were reflecting back on it, right in the very immediate wake of that, there was a good couple of days, maybe a week period of time where we weren't sure if it was over, right? Like there were rumors of more attacks. There were rumors of chemical warfare maybe going on. There were just so many stories coming out, just like right now. I mean, there's information, good information, misinformation. So I remember there was a period of time where we're like, okay, like what's going to happen next? We're still in it. There was a lot of uncertainty around there. But then at a point, it felt like, okay, the threat was kind of behind us. We could slowly start kind of going back to trying to do some things in a normal fashion. But I think what makes this one interesting, present moment, is we're still in the thick of it, and then we don't really know when it's going to end. So like, what are your thoughts? Like, just again, reflecting back, thinking like, how do you start trying to figure out when to start moving forward? Because I remember that was another thing
Yeah, I
too with
think,
us. Like, what are we going to do? Like, we were using some of our sponsors and taking stuff down to the city, through one of our hospital partners down to Ground Zero. But what are your thoughts on that part of it? Just getting to that point where you're like, okay, how do we move past?
yeah, I think the common thread between then and now, and even other tragedies that have happened in between, is that when these tragic moments occur, the reality of where sports sits on the priority list sets in, right? And that priority for sports is really not high, right? There's other things that need to be prioritized. But there's always a time and a moment when sports comes back and it takes its place, and it plays an actual huge role in the healing process, whether it just serves as a great distraction, a return to normalcy, a healer, a uniter, so many different roles that sports can play. And we've seen it time and time again, whether it was 9/11. In our particular case, we created what was called the Unity Games, which was the charity match that we held at the Meadowlands Giants Stadium between the MLS and the USA teams. You also remember around 9/11, there were so many great scenes around baseball at Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium, and they've made 30 for 30s around some of those other events. Remember the Boston bombing and the great moments at the Boston Garden. So time and time, sports has come into the equation sort of secondarily to play that significant role in helping communities heal. And I think that's the same thing we're all striving for today: is how do we find that? In particular, at a time when we can't really have sports, and sports arenas are closed, and we can't have mass or public gatherings. So I think it's a little bit of a challenge today for sports organizations. I'm in the midst of it right now in my role with the World Cup bid and the Harris County Houston Sports Authority, and trying to figure out, how can we use sports in this very, very difficult moment for the good things that it can bring to the table.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been joining a lot of these online chats and just trying to keep up to date with what teams are and aren't doing. And you could definitely see a struggle a little bit in the short term, meaning some teams are trying to figure out, what do we do during this time? Obviously, some are turning to social media and content with their athletes. There's a local minor league baseball team here, Rochester Red Wings. They're doing some cool things. They're like just helping push out the public messaging. They're supporting the first responders and the medical workers and the nurses, and they actually created baseball cards of the heroes, which I thought was pretty cool. But on the flip side, then there's the other side of where, okay, there's only so much you can do in a virtual digital space, and then there's the other side of the coin. Should they be selling right now? Teams are trying to sell packages and sponsorship, and I know that we had that debate at the Metro Stars. Like, there wasn't we didn't feel good that we were going to start selling right away in that environment. We thought we wanted to give back to the community more. So, like, what do you think? Like, what are you seeing from teams right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's hard to do business as usual. People are focused on so many different other things: their own health, their own safety, their families, their jobs, their livelihoods, the economy. So many different things are coming into play right now, and it's not easy to, like I said, conduct business as normal as a sports franchise right now. I'm experiencing this myself with the World Cup bid. We've got this terrific strategic plan that we've built that relies on so many community partners to help us and to assist. And if I'm being honest, I really can't be pushing my agenda on any of these folks right now. We need to take a back seat. There's other things that they're dealing with. They're trying to keep their own businesses up and running, their own employees engaged, et cetera, whatever the issues might be. So, I've personally decided to just stay in touch with people, stay connected, keep people informed, try to maintain the relationships and the enthusiasm and the excitement that existed, prior to this whole thing taking place. But it's awfully difficult to, like I said, to as I'll put it, push my agenda, or for any sports team or organization to push their agenda out in the public right now. So I think this is where leaders have an opportunity to think about how they can use the strength of their organization to give back to the community. Again, I've experienced that a few different times. We dealt with that here in Houston when I was president of the Dynamo when Hurricane Harvey struck in 2017. And again, nobody wanted us to be reaching out and calling them to sell them soccer tickets or sponsorships or whatever it might be. So we had to find unique, creative ways to stay in touch with our audience, our fan base, our partners, to keep them engaged and just to do the right thing in very difficult moments.
Yeah, actually, it was interesting. This just reminded me as we were talking, way back when I worked for Bison Baseball, even we had a really, really bad traffic accident right on the on ramp, pretty close to where our stadium was. And it was like one of those 30, 40 car pileups. One of these coils kind of came off a truck. And that afternoon, our bosses wanted us to keep selling. And I literally called one of the people that were in that accident. And I remember at the time saying, man, we probably should back off for a couple of days. And, even though it affected a small percentage of the population, it still was all over the news, and it was a horrific accident. And so sometimes it is tough to figure out what to do, when, and what not to do. And then I think some of those experiences you do take with you when, we end up in that 9/11 experience. The other thing I was going to ask you, and I was thinking myself from a sports management perspective. So okay, so we had our team president and our team owners, but then you and I were both managing our own staff. And in the wake of uncertainty, when you're not even sure yourself what's happening or what to do or what the right direction is, as a manager, if you're managing people on a team right now, how do you instill the confidence? What kind of messaging do you try to push down to your staff that are looking to you for guidance and support as a manager?
I think you just have to be human, and I think it's a moment where you have to show compassion and you have to show an understanding for what everybody is going through. And, I think this is a time when honesty and truth really, matters the most. And so, again, when you're going through difficult times and you're trying to keep everybody, spirits high, together, united, just, be thoughtful and be human and, have compassion for them and the situations that everybody's going through, and understand that the things that are going on in the office, may not be the most important things, in the world right now. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes that's a challenge too, because there's been moments where maybe your boss or owners are telling you one thing and you may be thinking something a little bit different. And so trying to find that balance where you're still kind of carrying through what the leadership is looking for, and you as a leader of your department, maybe you end up filtering that message or making it just a little bit softer in those moments. But then the other thing I was going to mention, and again, this reminds me of some things that I've also done professionally, using sports as a platform to help communities heal, get back on track, be a distraction, whatever you want to call it. But you were involved with the Sandy Hook kind of recovery and helping that community heal back in Connecticut. And even though you weren't in Connecticut at that time, you were still down in Houston with the Dynamo. I know that you kind of spearheaded the effort there to kind of rally the sports community together, because you're from Connecticut. So can you share a little bit of your experiences there and kind of what sparked that idea and what led you to go forward with that? Because I guess, again, it's like sometimes you don't know what to do. And so talk a little bit about that one. And then I want to share one that I have too as well.
Yeah, that was a little bit more of a personal thing than it was of an organizational thing. To your point, I grew up in Connecticut. Newtown, Connecticut was the site of this tragic school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary. Being down here in Houston, far away, I watched the news unfold like every American at that time, and was very, very sad and of that circumstance. But, being from Connecticut, I felt a connection to what was going on there. I also have a daughter who was the exact age of those victims at the time. So again, it really hit home for me. The shooting was on a Friday, sort of sat around all weekend, bewildered like everybody else. And then on Monday morning on my way into work, just spontaneously, I picked up the phone and I called my friend. His name's Eric DaCosta. He's the head soccer coach at Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut. And I asked him about the Newtown soccer community. And he told me that it was a really big soccer community. So they had great youth clubs there. They had an indoor facility. They had high school teams that were annually competing for state championships. So I said, well, why don't we do something? I said, you're involved in the soccer community there as a college coach. I'm involved here in the soccer community in this country as the president of an MLS team. And so we agreed to put something together, and it started out very small, where I was going to bring 4 Houston Dynamo players up to Newtown, and in combination with the men's soccer team at Quinnipiac, we were going to do a little youth clinic there. And what started out as a small idea eventually went viral and grew big, where we had almost every major soccer celebrity in the country in attendance. Mia Hamm, Landon Donovan, Alexi Lawless, on and on I could go with. We had every single Major League Soccer team represented there. Don Garber and the league got involved. ESPN was there. You name it. And it became this really big event. And, the intent wasn't necessarily to have this really big event. The intent was to bring joy back to this community. I think that's what's important when you're doing these things is to put the why first. And, this was not a fundraiser to go raise money. We weren't going to be able to bring these children back. This was about trying to create a moment about 3 weeks after the tragedy where we could put smiles on kids' faces and, again, bring some normalcy back. And we had, several thousand kids running around this indoor facility in Newtown, Connecticut on a Monday night for a couple of hours. And we accomplished our goal of bringing some smiles to people's faces. And I was fortunate enough to stay connected with that community, for the subsequent years and continue to bring events there and give back. So that was probably one of my career highlights, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I know we've had this conversation before when we were at the Metro Stars, and I had it when I was in Chicago as well, some other teams. And great, I got a cough. So you don't want to also become like ambulance chasers either, meaning, like we've had these conversations, like when there's a tragedy or something happens in the community as a sports team, you don't want to be viewed as like we're trying to take advantage of those things for publicity or PR. And I know sometimes we had those conversations like, okay, we don't want this to be perceived in the negative way, and we are truly trying to do something good, and we're trying to give back, and we're trying to, help the community. What would your thoughts be as it relates to kind of, because for me, we always just did, like you said before, we just did with what felt good and what felt right, and what we thought we could do to help, because it helped us heal as not only as an organization but help the community. Because you don't want to do nothing. But what are your thoughts on that concept of like you don't want to seem like you're opportunistic, taking advantage of these kind of tragedies when they happen?
Yeah, 100%. I think you have to do it for all the right reasons, and to do it for PR is not the right reason. And probably if anybody is doing it for that particular purpose, it's going to show through, and it's not going to come off very well. But getting back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, in leadership, ownership, team presence, whatever, trying to keep people focused. Every situation is going to be different, and I think there's an opportunity for leaders to find the right thing within that situation, to do the right thing. So again, I'll flash back to 2017 Hurricane Harvey here in Houston, Texas, where we got 50 plus inches of rain in a couple of days. I mean, several thousands and thousands of homes were flooded and people were underwater. And again, it wasn't a time to be calling people and trying to sell tickets to an upcoming Dynamo game. In fact, we didn't even know when there would even be another Dynamo game. So what we decided to do was to use our entire staff to reach out to our season ticket holders, to our sponsors, to all the people that were connected to the club, just to check in and make sure they're okay, to have a touch point and to see if they needed anything. And what we found was, number one, people really appreciated that gesture. Number two, there was actually people in need. People needed things in a tough time, whether it was plywood or vacuums or cleaning supplies or whatever. We tried to be there for our fan base, and I think that went over very, very well. And we eventually ended up creating a celebrity relief match known as Kicking It for Houston. In fact, the former U.S. national team player and Dynamo player Stuart Holden, who's a Fox commentator now, had the same kind of thing as I was feeling from Houston to the event in Sandy Hook. Stu is from Houston and living in California, and he wanted to help give back to the community. So together we put on this charity event. We had some really big celebrity names come in and raise some money to give back. That one was really about raising money to try to support victims and to give back in that way.
Yeah, I had two quick little similar experiences. So both of them happened to be when I was with the Washington Freedom, the women's professional team. And one was a friend of mine lost his family tragically in Kenya in a strange elephant accident that took his wife and his young daughter at the time. And we wanted to do something, and happened to be friends with a bunch of guys that were on the police force. And we ended up coming up with this cool charity match between the police and the freedom players. And it was like one of those things, like the minute you kind of put it out there, you don't know what to expect. And then that was a particular event where like Mia Hamm happened to be coming in town, and she ended up showing up and playing, and we got, it was a really good experience overall. And when we raised the profile for this safari kind of company out in Kenya that was really damaged by that event, and helped my buddy out through a foundation he created, which now is a huge library, and it's got tons of books and really done good things over in Africa as a result. And then in the wake, when my father passed away, he was a big painter and had a whole bunch of art that we kind of found. We had more paintings than we thought, and it was it was before NWSL launched, but in that kind of hiatus when WPS had folded. So same thing, I decided to create this celebration of women's soccer charity event, try to raise some money for just random local charities, and DC Scores was part of that event as well. And the response from the players, Christine Brennan came from the USA Today, Becky Sauerbrunn, Ali Long, and a whole list of former Freedom players just came, and sponsors got involved, and it just exceeded expectations, right? It was one of those things you're like, okay, this just feels right, and it's kind of trying to bridge the gap when there's no women's soccer going on. And then after that, NWSL launched, and I think it really helped the Spirit kind of gain a little bit of a foothold and kind of stay connected during that time. So I think a lot of teams are going to be in that situation where they're going to have ideas, they're going to maybe be reluctant to do things. Clearly right now they're not going to be filling 80,000 seats or 20,000 seats in a stadium right now, but I'm even wondering if like teams are going to play in a match just to stream it, right, where maybe all the players get tested and you do it as a virtual event, because I know people can only watch so many tape reruns of classic games and stuff. I mean, what are some of your other thoughts as we're going to keep this to like maybe 35 minutes, but what are your thoughts on like you think teams could start doing, or how do you see teams rolling back, or is it too early to tell still, you think?
I think it's too early to tell. I think it's a situation where if you're a team right now, you need to start looking at opportunities and thinking about them and pursuing them, but doing it in a way where that it's so uncertain in terms of what's going forward that you may or may not be able to pull off whatever idea you have, right? So I'll give you an example. Again, my World Cup bid committee falls under the direction of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority, which is the sports commission here, which is about bringing major sporting events to Houston, the Super Bowls, the Final Fours, the World Cups, et cetera. And we started to think about how can we take a leadership position in sports. We're envisioning the possibility of hosting an event, but when can we host an event again? When will that be good? Is that even doable? So, we're going to think about it. We're going to work on it. We're going to envision it. We're going to perhaps plan for it, but it may not be able to come to fruition. And then again, what are the needs to the community right now? I guess this is such an influx situation that it's hard to say, what the community needs are and where a response is necessary. When we were brainstorming, a couple of weeks ago, we had some ideas that we put on the table that would have been just completely wrong if we had decided to go forward with them based on the way things have played out, right? So this is a situation that's unfolding, and it's very, very difficult to say what the right thing to do is at this moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be really difficult and challenging for teams, and but in the meantime, it is cool seeing some of the flashback, throwback stuff. I know, for example, Major League Soccer showed their inaugural game, which who knows, they may have been planning some of that stuff anyway because they're trying to celebrate and connect the history of the league, but they had current and former players kind of on the live broadcast, which I thought was pretty interesting and unique. But what other, just I guess, kind of other thoughts do you have, Chris, at this time that you think you could share or share your experiences and wisdom on as relates to, I guess, not even sports business, but just like business in general right now?
Yeah, well, like we talked about, Mark, sports is plays a vital role in our daily culture, right? It's here for us, and I think maybe we even take it for granted at times. But think of all the great sporting events that have just been wiped out by this, whether it's the NCAA basketball tournament or just even some of these small, if you're a high school player or a college player, right? It's really been stripped of us. So eventually it's going to come back and it'll return to normal. But there's a void in our lives right now that have been created by sports. So, the way we're looking at it here locally is what can we do to try to fill that void? And I would encourage, all leaders in the sports industry to do this. And I know many, if not all, are already thinking that way, right? Again, sports, plays a critical role. It's missing right now. How do we fill that void? How do each and every one of us find ways to use our own organizations to help fill it? Here with the Harris County Houston Sports Authority, we've created a virtual idea as well. We've created basically a show that we're going to stream. It's called Houston Sports Queued Up, Q apostrophe D, like quarantined.
Oh, cool.
And we're going into the homes of great Houston athletes. We're doing Zoom interviews just like this. So we shot the first show yesterday with Jeff Bagwell, the former great Houston Astro player. It's going to debut Thursday night at 7:00. So every week we'll have Houston Texans, Rockets, Astros, Dynamo, Dash, you name it. Houston sports legends. And again, there's no real financial element to this whatsoever. It's all about trying to do a little thing here to create some normalcy. So there's, to your point earlier, there's only so much flashback games you can watch on TV. You need fresh new content. So that's what we're trying to do here.
And I know the other thing is, and even when it's like discussions like this, or for example, my agency's involved with bringing a startup summit here to Rochester, and we had it last October. It went really well. We got great reaction from the entrepreneur and local business community. We're going to host this again in November, the 11th, which we haven't really technically announced yet. We have a really great keynote speaker lined up. His name's Austin McCord. He founded a company called Dynamo. He's a Rochester Institute of Technology graduate. So we've been holding on this for 3 weeks because we're like, well, do we really want to announce a startup summit live event, even though it's in the fall? And we don't want to lose our keynote speaker because it took us literally almost a whole year to line this guy up to commit to it. And he's finally said yes. He's approved our press release and everything, and which we're going to now announce today because he did approve and say he's comfortable moving forward. But I mean, I guess that's the other thing is there's caution even just do you announce events when we know that the hospitals are overrun, people are sick, people are losing their lives from this disease. So that it's sometimes awkward even in that moment, knowing, hey, do we push stuff out there, knowing that our stuff's not nearly as important as what's kind of going on the front lines, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, look, it's case by case. I think it's a balance. A lot of people were critical of the NFL, conducting their free agency period. I'm not one that shares that thought. I was thankful actually that the NFL was providing news that we could view every night to take us away from, the daily bad news that was taking place and unfolding. So I think, it's case by case situation. Your event's in November. I think it's safe to assume that everything will be okay by then. Truth is, it may not. But you could always react and go about. But we need to strike this balance of respecting what's going on while trying to return to normalcy. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're all facing.
Yeah, it's a good point because when I do have these type of discussions, or I actually had a real live business discussion last week. Even just honestly, this is the first time I've thrown on my blazer and showered first thing in the morning kind of thing. It does provide you that mini escape. And even, but it's not taken away or detracting from kind of what also is happening in the moment. And I know that everybody's anxious to get past it, move forward, get into normal life, but we still don't know, and it's still too early for all that. And again, even coming to a studio like this, there, as much as you don't think there's any risk, there's still always risk because there's been other people in the room, and so it's going to be tough. But I do agree that it is good to kind of push out announcements, new content, new material, try to stay somewhat normal because I think it just helps everybody in this moment, but not to, again, detract from what's really happening on the front lines, and then using platforms like this to help people on the front lines, the nurses, the doctors. I mean, I think just like in 9/11, in the wake of that, police, fire, first responders became true heroes, and we realized what we do in sports is just not that important. and now we got a whole second subset of people that I think now everybody's gaining a total brand new appreciation for. And in some ways at 9/11, I think we lost some of that and after time went back on. But I still think to this present moment, you still see sports times all the time, recognizing, welcoming first responders and doing things on the field and at halftime. And I do think this is going to be the same when it comes to nurses and doctors and EMT. So to me, those are some positive outcomes that maybe come with this. And I think our community and society realizes that, hey, it's exciting and it's entertaining, pro sports, but they're not the true heroes in that sense. Same thing with soldiers, right? No. U.S. military.
I agree. I think, there's no doubt. I think sports is going to do a great job in honoring the people that have really stepped up in this time of crisis. And there's no doubt that the medical workers in hospitals and first responders are amongst them. But I also think there's other heroes that are emerging that, need to be considered. Just take, for example, grocery store workers and clerks, right? Can you imagine? You're going into a studio feeling a little bit uncomfortable, right? Imagine being a cashier at a grocery store for 8 hours a day, coming face to face with, hundreds of people and literally putting your health at risk. Those are heroes in my mind as well, too. And I think hopefully sports teams, find ways to honor people like that as well, besides just the nurses and the doctors who are, clearly
delivery people, garbage disposal folks. Like every day, when that garbage truck comes and the recycling guys come, they're wearing gloves. I don't see them wearing masks right now. Maybe they'll start wearing masks now, but it's like God only knows where this thing is living on or what surfaces they can come in contact with. And
right.
So to your point, I think those are things that all of us think way more of. Like you would maybe never would have thought twice about the disposal folks, So
hey, we're coming up on their house every day.
Yeah, we're coming up on 30 minutes. Hey, Scott, are you still back there in the production booth?
Yep.
So I wanted to, if I may, just give you a quick minute, just to talk just about RockVox Studios and kind of what you guys are doing during this time. And then, Chris, we'll let you kind of wrap it up, close with some just quick closing thoughts. But, Scott, thank you so much for letting Chris and I do this. This is way more formalized than, I thought. But it's great because it's just I wanted to support you and small business. So what is RockVox Studios doing during this time, and how can other businesses maybe work with you in that manner?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. We have a lot of different ways that we're working. I do e-learning and voice recording that I just do by myself. But a lot of people have been coming in to do their podcasts and do different get their messages out to their clients or to their audiences. And because I have 3 separate studios, people are able to come in and, there were 3 people on one podcast, each one in a separate studio. I'm in the control room and I could see them through the glass and through video. And so we were able to get those messages out there when normally they wouldn't be able to because they would be sitting at the table, all 3 of them within 6 feet of each other, which obviously doesn't hold to the social distancing rules that we're trying to live by. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to help you do your show. And, I'm just, if any small businesses or anybody has a message that they want to get out, come on by to RockVox Recording and Production, rockvox.com. We're in Bushnell Basin on the east side of Rochester.
Cool. And today is sponsored by Lysol, sadly. What, did somebody write something? Yeah. Is it a question? So, Chris, just final thoughts, and then we'll go ahead and wrap. And like I said, I appreciate you coming on. This was therapeutic for me. If for this 30-minute block here, I was back to talking a little bit about normal sports business, I suppose, even though the topic was, I'm sure there are other topics we'd rather talk about in some ways. But we have been able to use sports as a platform to help communities heal, put messaging out there, use our athletes to help in crisis moments. So, What's your just final thought on the subject?
Yeah, well, first of all, always good to be with you and visit with you and catch up. And congrats to you and thanks to you for being proactive and putting together forums like this for people to just to hear some ideas and to provoke some thoughts. So well done by you, and I know you'll probably keep doing this, and it's a helpful thing for you to do. So I just encourage everybody to continue to be safe out there and to think about ways that they can be proactive and contribute back to the community and to society, and be ready to do so whenever that time comes. I don't think we know when that time is going to come. It could be 30 days, 60 days, who knows, 90 days. But, there's going to be opportunities that are created here for sports organizations to give back, like I said, to help unite communities, to help provide distractions, to help provide returns to normalcy, to perhaps even raise some money for people who are in need. So it's a great opportunity to be thinking about all those things.
Yep, agreed. And one just last mini thing is I'm on the board of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and same kind of thing. They're a nonprofit. Their patients are really affected by this disease because their immune systems are compromised, and they're financially in a really rough position. And the same thing, like, do you go out and do your giving? Do you ask for money? And even these nonprofits are in a similar situation. So it is really difficult right now. But hopefully everybody will be strong. The social distancing, hopefully there's signs that it's working. So hopefully it does work, and not too long we'll get back to quote unquote normalcy. And I know Fred Mathis and Brett Zalaski joined today. I can't see everybody else because we just thought we'd facilitate this discussion. So anyway, Chris, thanks so much. Stay safe and well. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon, and maybe I'll get a chance to pop on this studio another time down the road here, but maybe we'll have a more normal talk about the World Cup coming in 2026. That would be awesome. And so we'll thanks again, and I appreciate everybody joining in today.
Mark.
Everybody stay safe and well.
You too.